Hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I have this two-part thing here that at first you're going to be like, yes, and then you're going to be like, oh man. So let me talk to you about a great word that we're going to learn about today, and it's called turnaround. And so we're going to talk about that. And the question really starts with, or comment says, what if you want a high performing team? Now, all the entrepreneurs around the world right now are going, yes, I totally want a high performing team. Now, if we stop there, that's where everybody's like, yes, let's talk about that. But the challenge here becomes the key to that turnaround, and the key to that high performing team is the leader. And that's where it's like, oh man, all the air gets let out. Everybody was super happy until they had to do this internal look at themselves. So I have a guy that we're going to talk about a 90-day turnaround, and I'm super excited to be hanging out with Kevin Herring. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, thanks. Great to be
Awesome.
here.
Yeah, absolutely. You are the co-founder of Ascent Management Consulting, and you're the creator of a 90-day turnaround team and leadership transformation. So that's a lot of words. So why don't you fill us in on what all that I just said for us? Fill us in on what's going on over there.
Sure. So we've been doing consulting for over 25 years and helping organizations and teams, both business units and teams, to turn around, to reach higher levels of performance by helping employees to engage at a higher level. And we've long wanted to expand the capability more in industry to help leaders to be able to do that for themselves. And so we've created the 90-day turnaround leader and team experience to help teams do that. And so leaders get walked through a process. It's a 90-day process. Every week or two, they get a new assignment, and they go out and execute that with their teams. And at the end of the 90 days, they've had a turnaround. The team is performing at a higher level. People are more engaged, having greater meaning and fulfillment at work. And it's really just a great experience.
Awesome. Well, and so I'm a high D person in disc, so I'm very results oriented. A lot of people listening, today, Kevin, are that way. And my first question right out of the gate is, how in the world do you measure what you just said? I mean, how do you measure engagement? How do you measure performance? How do you guys measure that? What are your metrics that you're using to be able to have an entrepreneur listening say,
Mhm.
yeah, you know what, that makes really good sense. So
Yeah.
how do you answer that question?
Great question. There are actually two aspects to that. One is the fundamental performance issue. What is the team? How's the team performing? And those are the ultimate metrics of success. How are we doing? Are we improving what we've done in the past? And when we work with teams in person, we guarantee at least a 20% improvement in performance, and we measure that based on whatever the critical measures are that we're working on in that turnaround. But team members can do that. Leaders can do that in their own organizations. Pick the fundamental outcomes that have to be produced by the team and establish the baseline, and then work from there. So we expect to, there in most cases should be a substantial improvement in performance. But the other piece of that is you mentioned is engagement. How do we measure engagement? And we like to measure it based on what we see. We like to think that everything equates to a number, but sometimes a narrative kind of description is a better way to measure the change. So in other words, when I go into an organization, what do I see? What would I describe what people are saying and what they're doing? And we can take the baseline of how that is today, and then we can see how that has changed after we've gone through a process of transformation.
So do you then, and thanks for sharing that, Kevin, and it sounds really exciting to actually have a number with that, 20% improvement, whatever that KPI looks like is awesome. On the second part, do you then ask people, do they like coming to work better? Do they like their job better? Do they like their team better? I mean, are you doing some before and after type questions to
We did that years ago. Yeah, we
Okay.
did that years ago. We kind of stopped doing the surveys. What we'd rather do is sit down with the team and identify how things are occurring today, for instance, as sort of the pretest, to say where are we today, and talk about processes. How do people work together? How do they take responsibility? How do problems get solved? How do decisions get made? How do people access resources? What's their understanding of the business and those kinds of things? And we just get people talking about that, and we make note of those things, and then we hold on to that. After we get through the process, we can go back and revisit those same questions and say, what's changed? What is different now? And we expect to see a major change in that regard, that people are far more knowledgeable about the business. They have a greater sense of personal commitment, and they demonstrate that by how they step up and take responsibility for things and help each other out, all those sorts of things.
Wow. And I think what's really unique is right now, Gallup is saying that 2 out of 3 people show up and they're not engaged in their job. They're trying to skate by. They're trying to say it's not my job. They're trying to get as little done as possible. I mean, it's a sad
Mm-hmm.
testimonial of our workforce. Don't get mad at me. That's just what Gallup, has had for years. That's been a pretty steady number where 2 out of 3 are not engaged. I mean, do you notice a pretty significant change there, or is it a situation where once in disengaged, always disengaged? Where do you kind of land in that concept?
Oh, it's a great point. It's night and day, and that's what makes this work so much fun. Is you go into an organization and you have to consider, when people take a new job, particularly when it's with a new employer, new organization, they go in with expectations.
Well,
They expect that the work is going to be at some level fulfilling, that they're going to enjoy the work, they're going to be challenged, they're going to grow, they're going to be able to accomplish a lot, they're going to get support from their leaders, they're going to have access to the resources and things they need to do the work. I mean, just have a whole body of expectations that they bring to the job.
sure.
And as there's a study by Cameron and Wetton years ago on this, and that said, that over time, what happens is people's expectations are unmet and begin to have an effect on the individual. And it just takes a matter of time where, one by one, those high hopes are dashed,
Right.
that people become disengaged. And they use the term learned disengagement, or is basically a learned response. That occurs for people after they come and
Gotcha.
work for an organization. And it usually happens within a short period of time, within the first year,
Wow.
and it just goes downhill from there. Now, here's the thing: is you can go into an organization where people are pretty disengaged, which, as we know from Gallup, that's most.
Right.
Right? Sad to say,
Yep.
but that's the reality. And so you work with a leader who may in fact be, in many respects, a pretty good leader, but just not understand this concept. They've been taught by somebody else in traditional management methods. And when we go in and teach them to lead differently, to work, to interact with the team differently, and to share power with the team, and build up the team's capacity to contribute, that pretty soon things start to shift. And within a short period of time, and we've studied this for years, and to shorten the time for the transformation, but we have found that it really doesn't take that long, which is why we had the 90-day turnaround.
Sure.
You can turn around a team in 90 days and get dramatic
Wow.
changes in that team. I mean, just dramatic. And we have leaders who say, you made a believer out of me. I never believed that could happen. And I'm just amazed at the results, particularly when you see a team that doubles productivity in that time. It's just a lot of fun to see. But yeah, it's night and day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And you brought something up that I want to circle back to. I mean, unmet expectations for someone on the team. I
Mhm.
tend to want to look at the leader as the person that needs to work on that. I mean, it's easy to tell a team member, whatever, get in line, lower your expectations, get real, whatever it is.
Yep.
however you want to address that, right? I just feel it's our responsibility as leaders to really make sure that everybody's expectations are met. Now, if they're unrealistic, we can talk that through. But I don't see a lot of team members, and I want to get your feedback on this, Kevin. I don't see a lot of expectations being unrealistic. Like you said, a fulfilling job, support, opportunity to grow, to be challenged, mentored, whatever that is. These aren't really unrealistic, but I'm just curious if you feel like it's the leader's responsibility to really take care of that team.
Yeah, absolutely. When we define culture, we define it as a combination of the work environment that people participate in each day, the rules, rules of engagement, as we like to say, the work practices, the way the work is organized, how the leader interfaces with them, and there are a whole lot of things that make up the work experience. And then on top of that is how the employees choose to engage in the face of that, because they do have choice, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
we do know some people who in the face of adversity step up, and they're just positive, and they go forward. It doesn't matter what they're faced with. They engage with optimism, and that's great. But they're in the minority. They're very much in the minority. Most of us who are in a set of negative circumstances where become disengaged, right? We choose to withhold our contribution, because it's just emotionally so draining.
Sure.
And
Yes.
so the question is always, who creates that environment? Who is most responsible for the environment that we all go to work in each
Sure.
day? And you're
Yep.
exactly right. It's the leader. The leader has by far the most influence over that.
Yep.
And so we find a lot of leaders struggle with some of these changes, whereas the team members have no problem. They embrace it. They love this opportunity
Right.
to be able to engage at a higher level. They want it. Um, but it's the leader that has the biggest challenge, because, as you said, sometimes they have to confront themselves and how they see people on their team, because that influences the practices that they engage in as they interface with their team and
Yeah.
as they work with their teams.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I tell you what, the odd thing is that a lot of people, I think, Kevin, that don't really think are affected by this is the customer. And,
Mhm.
that's why when I wrote my book, Growing on Purpose, we were talking about if a strong team will create a strong customer experience. And a weak team will create a weak customer experience. And the difference between a strong customer experience and a weak customer experience is profit. And
Mhm.
so that's what's unique about what you're saying is, these expectations that the team has. If it's my responsibility as a leader, it can be like this vicious circle, right? I'm going to blame my team, and my team ultimately is looking to me to create some of that culture that you said. So this can be a really a vicious, nasty circle that, quite frankly, I don't want to be part of. Most people don't want to be part of. So that's why they start looking for other jobs, you
Yeah.
know, and rather than blame, it's so easy, right? Today, in today's world, to blame somebody else, blame the other,
Mhm.
government party, blame the weather, blame the competition, whatever, blame your boss. And it's just like, when are we going to take that responsibility and say, hey, I'm the one responsible for this team, and I want to jump into this 90-day transformation type of turnaround.
Mhm.
When you have somebody that's at that spot, what's kind of the first thing? What is like the entry level spot? What's the first thing you guys talk about in this 90-day turnaround?
First is the leader's stance about people. That's number one.
Okay.
There are some things you have to have in place to be able to do this kind of work. You need to have authenticity. You have to have integrity and transparency, so that there's credibility. People can believe what you're telling them. But all of our intentions and our subsequent practices as leaders come from our beliefs, our assumptions about people. And we like to call it stance. So when we look at at our teams, what do we see? Do we see a group of people who are naturally very self-motivated, committed, and capable? Or do we see a group of people that are fairly undependable, fairly lazy, need to be motivated, need to be watched, and that sort of thing?
Sure.
And so we like to call it the kind of the controlling stance, or the trusting stance, or the controlling stance, with a trusting stance being high trust, low control, and controlling stance being low trust, high control, obviously. So I did I've done this with a number of management groups. The first time I did it was with a group of restaurant managers, this chain of restaurants, and doing some leadership work. Had them all in a room, and I did kind of the I think it's Hilton that gives like $1,000 for
Yep,
each,
it is Hilton. Yep.
right? And for each employee to be able to satisfy a customer, right? So I took that notion and I said, okay, with this group, and I said, let's say your average meal is under $25. Let's say you gave $25 to each employee to satisfy each customer. So if they had a complaint, they had a problem, you could swap something out, give them a free side order, a free meal, a voucher for a future meal, or any of a number of things that you could do. How would you feel about doing that? There were people that came flying out of their chairs over that. They were so animated and emotional about it. They said, "Are you out of your mind? We would be out of business in no time. They'd be giving free food to all their friends, and you can't trust them for a minute." They were just in shock that I'd even suggest such a thing. And this went on for quite a while. People were just so excited about this, and not in a good way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly.
And once they calmed down, then I asked, is there anybody else in the room who has a different view of this? And one by one, people stood up and said, wait, I trust my people. I wouldn't have that problem. I know I wouldn't.
Right.
I know that if I gave them that kind of latitude and gave them a little instruction and some parameters and things, they would use that responsibly in the interest of the business. I'd do that in a heartbeat. And then once in a while, you had somebody say, I would do that for 90% of my employees. I've got a couple of them I'd probably want to keep a tight rein on, but for the most part, the other half of the room had a different opinion. And so when you looked at it, you found they were split about 50-50. Now, I've done this in a lot of organizations, and usually it's about 50-50.
Gotcha.
They're the high controllers, the high trusters. Yep. It's interesting to see. But if you don't trust your employees, if you think they're generally undependable, incapable, lazy, whatever, you're never going to empower them. You're never going to give them access to resources, controller resources, decision authority. Every time there's a problem a customer has, an employee's got to run up the chain, to get to the right level, to get that question answered so that they can go back down the chain and solve the customer's problem. And heaven forbid, it's in another line of authority in the organization. So you have to go up your chain and then cross over and back down, and and that sort of thing. Because the customer's long gone by the time you get an answer.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's the difference, is if you trust people, if you believe that they're inherently desirous of coming to work, doing a good job, contributing at a high level, and feeling satisfied at the end of the day that they've contributed in the interest of the whole team, the whole organization, say, then you treat them differently.
Yeah.
Right? You treat them. If you're not willing to do that, you will never have high engagement, because you'll never do the things that enable high engagement. You'll never create the conditions for people to perform at high levels. So you'll never have a high performing team. So stance is number one.
Yeah. That is
here's the challenge, though. Let me just follow that up with.
For sure.
The question is, what do you do if somebody is a high controller, low truster, right? Can they not move forward? Mm-hmm. And so I was telling them, look, here are your options. I mean, you can just say, this is the way I am, can't change, not going to change, don't believe it, whatever, and you're stuck in your ways, you're not going to be able to make the change, and we can't really help you in that case. Or you could say, that's not my background. I just have never come from that space. And this is new to me, but I can see some wisdom in it. I can see some value in it. And I'm willing to take what I've learned here and apply it. I'm on board. I'll do what has to be done to make this work. And then you're good to go. But you might be the person who just says, this doesn't make sense to me. I know that people want me to do this, but it doesn't make any sense to me. And so what you're faced with is a choice. Are you willing to take a leap of faith?
Right.
So even if it doesn't make sense to you, will you take a leap of faith and do what's necessary to give it a fair shot? Because I know if you do, you're going to see the benefits of it and you're going to embrace it in the end.
Right.
But you have to take a leap of faith to give it a fair shot first.
Well, there's so much there. Thank you for sharing that. I wrote a bunch of stuff down. I want to start with the exact spot where you were, the skeptical person versus trusting. Now, from a personality assessment perspective, from DISC perspective, people are built one way or the other. I can be built. I know people, and I just was at a meeting this morning where we had on the same team, we had a skeptical person and we had a trusting person, and they could understand after we unpacked this together that neither one's right or wrong. It's just that that's how they're built. So how in the world do you get somebody that's skeptical about their team to trust their team? Because that's really a tough spot for some of these people to be that are naturally built skeptical. Any advice or feedback on that?
Yeah, let me give you a couple examples. Years ago, I went to work for a new company, and there was and they were going through a transformation. This was a great experience, but they had a manager over their largest division who was pretty detailed, high controlling kind of guy. And I went and tried to set up a meeting with a bunch of his managers. And I got this notice back from him saying, I don't think you understand how we do things around here. And I said, no, you're right. I absolutely don't. But I'd love to have you kind of help me out. He says, I'd love to help you out. And I spoke to a coworker who told me that he works well with this guy and says, I've never had any problem with him. You need to understand how he thinks and how he works. And his coaching was very helpful to me. He said, the guy's name was Rick. He said, you got to know that Rick has a need to understand. He's naturally skeptical. Yep. He's always seems like he's challenging and not accepting, but what he's trying to do is understand at a deeper level what you really want and what's going on. And once he understands that, he will help you. He will bend over backwards to help you succeed.
Sure.
And I took that to heart, and I found he was great to work with. I had no problems. Some people had a lot of problems working with Rick. I had no problems working with Rick, and that's why. And I think it's like, to your point, understanding people, why they're, what is it that's causing that skepticism? What's behind it? And I always say, you always look for resistance points. People always want to avoid that. We don't want resistance. We want everyone to accept. And no, you want it. It's natural to have some degree of resistance in any system. I want to find that. I want to seek it out. I want to find it. I want to embrace it so that I can address it, so I can deal with it. And so I think it's critically, when you're dealing with somebody, you just have to understand where they're coming from and make them part of the analysis, right? I'll give you one other quick situation. I had working with a medical organization, and had nurses who, this was a head nurse, I believe, who had a staff of nurses, and she was very high control. She did a lot of things herself that she should have delegated to her staff.
Sure.
And after working with us a little bit, she agreed that she would distribute some of the work out to staff members and give them more latitude for the work so that things could be done more efficiently and so on. And but she was very skeptical. And I told her, I wonder, I said, now, as soon as somebody, this is new to everybody. So somebody may slip up,
Yeah.
but as soon as they slip up, you can't just pull the rug out from under them and take it all back.
One
You have
chance,
to, right?
right?
You have to train them. You have to teach them and help them to succeed. She said, yeah, I got all that. But I can tell you the first time somebody slipped up, she grabbed it and wrenched it out from their hands and she took it right back and said, yeah, I knew all along they weren't willing to do this.
Painful. Yeah.
Right. So you have to work with that skepticism and help people understand what they can expect and how to respond to it.
Yeah, and those are great points, and I think that's why we use disc so much because
Mhm.
not all people understand that they may be skeptical, so they just think that that's they might think it's a flaw, and so they try and go the other extreme, or in that case where at least you can point it out that hey, you probably are going to struggle with whatever it is, and
Right.
that self-awareness alone helps us to be able to improve that. I
Yeah,
mean,
you
I go
can't
back.
fight how people are wired. You know,
Yes.
we're all wired in certain ways.
Yep.
The trick is to be able to learn how to work with it and help people from their perspective see what they need to see to move forward.
Right. Yep. That's a great point. Now I won't go, and you go back to like the restaurant managers, isn't it funny how 2%, and these numbers are fictitious, but they work for me, 2% of people create screw it up for 98% of the people, right? I mean, I'm sure on that team there were a couple people that would take advantage of a $25 deal. And yeah, their neighbors are there, their friends are there, and all of a sudden all this
Mhm.
potentially going out the door. But the reality is the vast, vast, vast majority of people are not going to take advantage of that. But so now we take a great concept and we kibosh that, we stop that because there's this really small group of people, and then the customer suffers. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the real tragedy here is, we've all been in restaurants where the experience was bad, and what happens next determines if I'm ever coming back again.
Mhm.
And, and I'm going to go tell a bunch of people if I had a bad experience, I'm going to go tell a bunch of people. And, that's what I think is so unique about that. And it becomes that, high control, low trust. And if there's no control, then people think, oh my gosh, it's the inmates running the asylum, so to speak. And
Right.
it's just not that black or white. So I greatly appreciate you sharing that information. Um, I wrote down the two scary words that no one wants to talk about anymore is authenticity and transparency, right? I mean, those are words that entrepreneurs tend to run in the opposite direction of, so how do you get managers, how do you get leaders to really open up and be vulnerable? Because it's hard to expect your team to be vulnerable if you're not going to be vulnerable as a leader, correct?
Yeah, and it has to be, they have to have safe space to be able to raise difficult issues. I would say it's interesting how in most organizations, things as basic as finding better ways to do the work are scary.
Right. Yeah.
People are expected to, if they're going to make any suggestions at all, to do it anonymously, which is crazy. It makes no sense whatsoever. I can't imagine having an organization where people are afraid to make things better. That frightens me. Right.
Right. Yep.
So I've shared this experience with a number of people, but I think that it just illustrates the point really well. And that is sometimes people make mistakes and they have to be free to make mistakes and try new things, to experiment, to do, to make things better, to help the organization to be successful. And when they do that, if it doesn't work out, you can't punish them for taking the initiative and doing what you want them to do. So
Right.
things have to be safe. You have to be able to have in a room, have a group of people in say a team meeting, not
Right.
all nod their heads up and down in agreement to everything that you say as a leader, and then walk out of there and then go into the bathrooms and start talking about what they really think about it.
Yeah,
You just
exactly.
can't have that.
Yep.
And so one of the things I like to do is when I get leaders in a room is I'll tell them, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the most recent decision that you've had to make, and I want you to put it to the team and push the team to argue against it, and help them to understand that what you want to do is find the weaknesses in that decision so that they can be addressed, so you can mitigate any problems and, you know, consequences and so on. And so what they'll often find, and usually find, in fact, is that nobody says anything. Everybody's afraid nobody's going to take the opposing side. And sometimes leaders have to really push employees to do that and go around the room to say, all right, here's the deal. I want everyone to come up with a reason why this, be the devil's advocate and tell us, if you were on the other side of this issue, what would you be arguing? And everybody
Yeah.
has to come up with something different,
Yeah.
and sort of put them on the spot. But once you give them a chance to do that, and they find that it's safe to do that, and they're praised for their authenticity and their willingness to challenge, you know, then you can start creating breakthroughs in your communications.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. And I go back to the disc again because there's a large group of people that are very accommodating. You know, Kevin, that's what they are. They're looking for ways to remain at peace. They're
Sure.
looking for ways to keep the group together. So, you know, in our black and white thinking, it's either if I challenge something, then I'm looked at as a negative person, or I'm looked at as, you know, you're always trying to find a reason to not make it work. So how do you find a balance there? Because, you know, there's a lot of people probably in their mind that are thinking it's not going to work, but they don't want to appear negative, so they go along with it. I don't know if you've had any experience with that.
I think, yeah, absolutely. And you have to keep it to a business case, right? If somebody is afraid something isn't going to work, they need to say why. They need to be able to make a case for it. And of course, you also have people who naturally don't feel comfortable moving forward until all their questions, all their concerns are resolved. And obviously, companies can't operate that way. You have to step into the dark a lot.
Yeah.
And right. And so you have to help teach them, to people in those circumstances, teach them, you know, what is a reasonable balance to have, you know, when you don't want to move forward, and you know, or where you need to reverse course. And again, we're wired differently. There are people who are far more assertive than I am, who would rather just do something before they've even figured it out, with
Yeah.
the expectation that if they find down the road they're going the wrong direction, they'll make adjustments and get on track and do something else.
Sure.
And they're very comfortable in that environment. Other
Yeah.
people are the opposite. They have to sit down and have it all planned out, with expected outcomes at every step of the way before they even take the first step. And there's
Yeah.
a happy medium in the middle there somewhere for most cases. Sometimes you do need to be in one end of the spectrum or the other, but most of the time we need to be somewhere in the middle and
Right.
be able to sort that out.
Sure. I think that I like to use ground rules for meetings so that people understand what they can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when someone comes into a meeting and an idea gets presented and they're like, that's never going to work. What a stupid idea. You know, I mean, if it's that type of bold statement, that matter of fact, the rest of the room most likely is not going to say much the rest of that
Right.
meeting. But if we say, oh my gosh, that's a great point. I never thought of that. Tell me more. Tell me how you think that would work. You know, those are two totally different ways to approach the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody says, great point, I never thought of that, or tell me more, it really energizes most people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to be more of a contributor. I always am challenged with the person in the room that never says anything,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, you got to have ideas. How in the world do I extract those out of you? You know, and sometimes I would lose patience back when I had my teams. I would lose patience and be like, seriously, what are you thinking right now? And that can put some people on the defense if you don't bring that up right.
Sure.
So you guys use ground rules, or how do you suggest for people listening to really make a meeting safe like that?
Yeah, we do a couple of things. One is we do ground rules, like you're saying, and we have a kind of a core set, but we ask the team members to decide what their ground rules should be, you know, how they want to operate, and to create the ones that fit best or adopt the ones that make the most sense. Um, so we fully use the ground rules to help with managing the meetings, but we also like to have some procedures in place and have the team agree to how decisions will be made
Okay.
and what those processes look like, so that you don't get stuck. You know, there's an opportunity, especially if you're working with a team and you're trying to get consensus decisions made,
Yeah.
which can be very challenging. We said, well, how do we do that? I mean, we can't all agree. My wife and I can't agree on everything. How are we going to get a group of people in a room that
Yeah, she
that I'm
told
not
me
that
about
close with?
that. She told me about that, Kevin.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that after the show here. But I agree with her. It's so much easier, dude. I'm just saying. So all right, go ahead.
Yeah. But yeah, we put something. We say, like, put something forward, like we have when things are sort of stalled out. Maybe we have a lot of options we've talked about, but we can't really come to an agreement. Then let's have a person put something forward, say, okay, let's propose that. Whoever has the idea, let's propose that, and then let's have so many minutes to discuss it, you know, that alone. And then you know, we decide who can support that. You know, it doesn't mean that it's your first choice,
Right.
but who can support that, get behind it, and make it successful. And most of the time, the best choice isn't the best choice to make, just because if you don't have everybody fully committed and engaged and supporting the decision, then the best choice is going to break down. It's just not going to be successful. And so it's okay to not have the best, but as long as you have a good choice that everybody will rally around, you know, you can do a lot of great things.
Yeah. Wow. I'll never forget the story about Kodak when they invented that, Instamatic camera, and the engineer came in, and I think it was probably about the size of a small microwave. I mean, it was this huge camera, and they had created this fantastic, idea, and they got a prototype, and basically the board said, don't say a word about this. It's never going to go anywhere. And then a few years later, a competitor took it, and Kodak obviously lost the
Right.
market share and filed bankruptcy, and who knows where they're at now. But that's the thing about it, is you never know what idea is going to come out of it. And if
Mhm.
people, half the room is not willing to express why they were hired. I mean, I don't know about the people listening, but I hired people on my teams back in the day to be able to give me some really great advice and ideas, share from their past experience. I didn't want we had 22 people on our team. I didn't want 22 people to be like, yeah, great idea, while inside they're going, terrible
Right.
idea,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
You can't have that. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, nobody wins in that.
Right.
And so that's where I think, the 90-day turnaround is just really a great spot for people, to be able to experiment with this and really understand the depth that their team has, because we all have rock stars on our team.
Hmm.
Even the unengaged or the disengaged, like you said, can be turned around. I don't think all people that are disengaged don't wake up saying, man, I can't wait to screw over my boss today. It just kind of happens. And
Yeah.
so I'm assuming you're working with the disengaged people. I mean, this is really helpful for them as well as for the engaged people,
Oh,
correct?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the things a colleague said to me years ago was, um, you have to ask people, do they see themselves as um, XYZ company, let's say IT specialist, or HR person or a widget maker? Or do they see themselves as an XYZ business person who has expertise in some particular area, but
Sure.
who is working in the interest of the whole? And that's not just a semantic kind of difference,
Right.
right?
Sure.
You know,
For sure.
and what business owner who wouldn't want their people to see themselves as fellow business people trying to help the whole business be successful, because they operate very differently that way. It's less siloed. They're not throwing
Yep.
things over the wall to somebody
Yep.
without consideration for what the other person needs. They're working more as interdependent groups of people, and willing to sacrifice some of the things that they want for themselves in the interest of the bigger group.
And I think that to me, I label that as a question: is this a job or is this a career?
Mm.
No, I mean, job, you show up, you're punching the clock, you're watching the clock. Yeah, exactly what you said. There's so many handoffs in a company today that, Olympic relay racers spend more time on the handoff practice than they do on actually running. And so what's unique is, like you said, do I just throw it over the, wall and hope someone catches it? It's kind of like a customer calls in and I push the button of who they're supposed to go to. And you know what? I out of sight, out of mind. I don't know if I did it right. I don't know if anyone's picking it up. And here's this, best customer, great customer, average customer, whatever, somebody that wants to spend money with us. And they're just sitting there on hold and nobody knows. And you look down and the thing's still blinking. It's like, it's like, oh my gosh, we've all been there as consumers. That's the funny thing
Sure.
about this experience for customers is
Mm-hmm.
we've all been at a fast food restaurant where we got disrespected, or we've all been, said mean things to somebody having a bad day as a clerk, whatever. And so I think that a 90-day turnaround is applicable pretty much anywhere there's a team, I'm guessing, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Any level. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, this has been fantastic. I got a really tough question for you, though, and I'm putting you on the spot. I know that you know Japanese, and so I wanted to know, how do you say positive polarity podcast?
Oh my word.
Do you know how to do that? Because if you do, you're going to be totally my rock star, even more than you are.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do that off the top of my head. I gotta think about that one.
Oh man.
Podcast is an easy one.
Okay.
That would be podcastu.
Wow. Podcast is easier to say. So, all right, cool. Well, and as we land today, I really want the person listening. I mean, again, it's super easy for us to look at our team and see their faults. And it's a little bit harder to realize that we hired them. And it's really hard, I think, to take that and internalize that. And that's what I think is so powerful about a 90-day turnaround. And so if you're listening, rather than just jump onto your next podcast, or, jump onto, going onto your radio show, whatever you're going to do next, if this is really resonating with you, I just want you to take a second and really think about some of the outcome of what could 20% improvement do. What could you have if all of your expectations of your team were met? I mean, we talked about some really powerful things. And, Kevin, if somebody is interested in learning more about you and what you're talking about here, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, two places you can go. One is the website. Our website is ascentmanagement.com, and it's spelled ASCENTMGT, short for management.com. But the other is the 90-day turnaround, and you have to have the at the beginning. So the 90dayturnaround.com will take you to a site where you can get information all about the 90-day turnaround. And if you scroll down toward the bottom of that first page, there's actually a one-day engagement event. It's a 6-step process that we're offering for free that you can go in and it's a little mini course and you can take it, no cost right now, and something you can do to engage your team immediately and really create a great experience for them and boost the performance of that group as well.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. Thanks for offering that. So, if you are listening and your team is not where you want them to be, you know, Kevin just gave you two great spots. And if you choose not to take them, that's totally fine. Don't get mad at Kevin. Don't get mad at me because we're making this available to you to be able to see, hey, 6 steps, maybe there's something in there that you can work with. And even if 20% doesn't happen, let's cut it in half and say 10%, I mean, that's a huge improvement. Who here wouldn't look for a 10% improvement on their team? And all of a sudden, owners become a lot happier. And more importantly, I keep want to reiterate this, customers will notice. I mean, we're all customers and we all notice a bad experience and we all notice a good experience. So I just want to challenge everybody today to take, Kevin up on his offer and, invest some time in your team, only though if you're willing to invest time in yourself. So your homework here today, Kevin, is you have to tell me what Positive Polarity Podcast is in Japanese, because I totally want that for LinkedIn and everything. It's just going to be so fun to hear it because it sounds great. But thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And I can't wait to keep learning from you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.